the thing is, if you have like complicated workflows with pipelines and sub pipelines, um, in the past things weren't as easy to evaluate, to build, to see what's going on. And so that is why at some point you can either try to make things simpler or more transparent. And at some point you can't make things more simple than we're dealing with complicated scenarios sometimes. And so that is why at some point we came to the realization, like, okay, so we need to provide transparency, and not just when running in the GUI, when developing, but also when we have things running remotely in production in Apache Beam pipelines, especially. They're like notoriously hard to see what's going on in those, right? And so yeah, that's what this um, um, thing is all about, right? I think I have like a couple of slides, right? Maybe I can share my screen for a bit. And now I have to start this with a caveat. I've been working on 2.2 for for a while now, so I'll be demoing everything on 2.2. I don't want to see where the bugs are at 2.1, since we're probably going to release 2.2 in a few weeks anyway. So the idea of this thing is that if you have anything executing, like a workflow, pipeline, or the actions and transforms in there, or sub-pipelines of actions or transforms and so on, they will report what they're doing, the information about the execution, to a certain location. And that location can be either a folder somewhere where subfolders will be created based on the unique ID that each of these executing entities get, or into a Neo4j server. Now, this is a new plugin system, so you can build new plugins for whatever kind of logging or any sort of backend that you have in mind. But those are the two that we have. And then we also have the ability to do remote. We have a remote execution information location, a little bit like you would have like a remote pipeline execution, a remote pipeline run configuration, where you send everything to a hop server, which then delegates off to a folder or to Neo4j, or indeed off to another hop server, if that's the sort of thing that you fancy. And then you can query that information either in the folders and files or Neo4j, or using the Hop GUI, where it's useful to see what's going on. And we also have a transform that actually can query that information. So you can get the information about what got executed and all the details that I will show you later. And so this is also supported on Beam pipelines. So you can, for example, run a pipeline on GCP Dataflow and then send that information to Aura, to Neo4j in the cloud. Or you can run a hop workflow on a server somewhere, or in a scheduler, or with a Docker container. It doesn't really matter how you execute it, as long as this workflow or this pipeline can access the location that you build, that you define in the metadata, then you're good to go. So quite simple, but despite that, a lot of people had like questions. They see like an empty screen here in this, and then they ask how can we configure this. So let me show you, right? So if you go to the pipeline run configuration dial, metadata section, you have your typical local run configurations, right, that you have available. And in there, you can specify where you're going to send the information, the execution information. In this case, I set up a folder called TMP executions. And somehow I should get a terminal, right? So if you go there, what you will see typically is just a whole bunch of unique IDs of all the different running transforms and pipelines and whatever. And in there, you will see an execution.json, which says, okay, so this is a mapping output transform. This doesn't have a file name as part of its parent. So you can go to the parents. It's execution.json, which is a certain mapping that I was testing with. And it contains like the whole execution XML, everything that was available as far as metadata. At the start of this pipeline or workflow, we save everything that we can because it's only like a few kilobyte anyway. So why not save that? So this gives us like for a pipeline like the one that I showed here. You know, this is logging something. This adds like a file result, sets variables. This is like the simple workflow that demos various things. Now, if you have run this configured with a certain execution location, you can navigate to this with the toolbar icon, navigate to the latest execution information, click on this, and what will happen is that it will load this. Now, in this case, I ran this using Neo4j, so it's downloading this from the cloud. My apologies. But anyway, so as you can see, it will show you like a read-only copy visualization of that workflow. And if you click on the various actions here, you will see like, okay, so the result of the action is log something, right? But here, there's like a result file that got added. Here, there's a variable that got set, so a variable after the execution. Here, not all variables are listed, obviously, just the ones that are interesting, you know, before and after you do a differential and see what's going on. Let's see, in case you have like repeating actions, you know, you can actually drill down into this using these arrows. You can drill down into the action, or you can also double click on this. You know, for the double clickers, you can then get a list of all the various repetitions of this action, in this case, a pipeline. And let's take number 5, and then it will load this and open it up. And this is a pipeline. And for pipelines, you can configure it to show the last rows of data that went through this. And the way that you do this is, again, like in this pipeline run configuration, you can set an execution data profile. And the execution data profile for last rows means I just want to get the last output rows. All right, so very simple. There's also another data profile available called data profile, which captures the first, the last, random output rows, and also data, the sort of like data profiling on all the values in the rows. Very, you know, it's very heavy. So there's an option to do only the last transforms in the pipeline, because usually those are the more interesting ones. And so let's jump back a little bit. In any case, so that's pretty much how that works, right? And yeah, let's see what we can also show about that result rows. So we regularly get like questions like, I don't know exactly what's going on with copy rows to result. How many rows do I have available? Now you can actually see the result rows of the action. You can actually get like a data grid with all the information in there, which is very useful. And variables before, and after the execution. So that's very useful. So obviously the details like the result, number of errors, and yeah, and yeah. What else can I say? Not much, right? um, I think we've added zooming capabilities in various locations, and um, yeah, let's take a look. I started a pipeline earlier. I don't know if that is actually running. So yeah, this is running on Google Cloud Platform Data Flow. There you go. I don't know why the names got changed recently, but so this is generating some random messages from Lord of the Rings, and it's doing this, I don't know, not too quickly, right? I delayed it purposely, I think to 10 records per second. Let's take a look. I think it's yeah, so 10 records per second. So if you see something like that running, you can get some metrics, right? So some, but you don't actually know what's going on there. So what we can do is actually uh, go to the execution information page, and this is logging the data into a Neo4j server, also running in the cloud. But you can start your own Neo4j, or you can log to Google Storage or Amazon S3 or Azure Blob. You can save files, right, just like you would do locally, and then you can actually see, click on this. And because in B we don't have a copy number, because you can have any number of copies of a transform started. We basically say last rows of random value dot, and this random unique ID of this transform is basically the identifier. And then you can see what's going on. You can see the last X rows and the actual messages that get created on the server, and you can actually see that timestamp change. It's an hour off, I think, but every time you click on this thing, it will update. So that's 15 seconds, 10 seconds later. I think I do an update every 10 seconds. So with that gives us kind of like transparency into these engines, into these obtuse black box engines, and you can actually see what's going on, what they're doing. The limitation there is that we only send data for Apache Hop transforms at this moment, not, for example, for the PubSub, because that's not our code. But if you want to know information, you can always add a dummy at any place, right? And then you get that information. The dummy will send information to the execution information location. All right. Um, So one of the cool things that this does give you, and this is something that I've been working on for 2.2, since I am working for Neo4j. This is sort of like my thing, right? If you have like these nested uh, workflows with multiple levels, so in this case, this goes to a pipeline which generates 2 or 3 rows. If it generates 2 rows, there's no error anywhere. And in here, in this workflow, we do another layer deep down and another layer deep down. And at some point, there's a decision to say, like, if we have ID number 3, iteration is 3 or larger, we're going to have an error somewhere. So this means that you have these like execution lineage chains which are successful time and time again, and then at some point something happens, and those are like really nasty to debug, right? And so this is where the graph database comes in the sense that it can actually just figure that out for you, right? You can basically, let me just close a couple. Oh, it's finding the parent. Finding a parent is trickier. Uh, yeah, I'm gonna switch to local logging in a bit, and then things will be a little bit snappier. I think that that pipeline is constantly logging to my small instance. Just cancel this one. That will help. And so, yeah, I think, what else can I say about that? Oh, yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about um, how we can find an error in this scenario, right? Because, yeah, um, the error lineage itself isn't all that easy to figure out. Let me just take a look. I think my machine is just in demo mode right now. Anyway, so this is what's happening with the debugging, with the insight that you get. We're adding more and more functionality to have you to give you access to various ways of seeing what's going on inside that complicated pipeline or workflow. Let's see if I have another one. So this is the mapping that I created earlier. We made this completely like configurable so that you can choose which run config to use, right? So yeah. And so if I now run this, let's take the local runner. So this is just logging locally, and this one is also logging locally. But now you could basically say I should run config, right? You can define it like this. This is, by the way, a new feature in the mapping that you can do that. But in any case, so you can jump to the execution of that, and you can drill down into that mapping and actually see the rows that went through that mapping. That's just sort of like the idea, because otherwise it becomes too complicated at some point to see what's going on. Reusable things, sub pipelines, sub workflows is all fine and dandy, but it becomes hard to keep it all in your head, right? All right. So yeah, that's pretty much it, actually. There's not much else to it. Maybe I can show what the data profiling stuff spits out. It's actually just some data that it picks up. It's a lot more data, obviously, since it's it gets like all sorts of information for every field in the output. It figures out the maximum length of the first name, and that's Stevie Ray from Stevie Ray Vaughan. But not only that, it figures out the maximum length, and it figures out a sample row to go with that, so that you know which was the row that contained that thing. And that's usually, I guess, useful for things like null values. So how many times was gender null value? Once, and then you can find somewhere sample rows of that, and then you know the row that contains this. Just like with the Neo4j tabs, we're going to I'm going to try to create a special tab for this data profiling information if we find it in the data to represent it in a better way, maybe with some histograms or stuff like that, right? but that's future work. At least now we already captured the data, and if you have a worry or something like that, you can enable this for a particular pipeline to see what's going on. All right, cool.
What you may or may not have mentioned, Matt, is that you now can start a pipeline or a workflow in Hop Run, running there, and then switch to Hop Gui and follow up the progress of that pipeline or workflow there.
Yeah. So let's try it, maybe, right? And workflow execution. Which one are we going to take? Let's close a couple more. Yeah, that hierarchy is ending too quickly. Maybe the workflow execution test. So what we need to do at that point is cd hop, and so if my hop run is not rusty, it would be something like hop to GCP for the settings, and a local configuration, and let me just delete everything in here. So this deletes every information in the location. It tries to help you out with cleaning that up. It gets spammy pretty quickly. I don't know what the best way of handling that is. Maybe have some automatic delete function. That's like tricky, right? In general, I think it's simple enough to just delete all folders in it if you have execution information. Yeah, it should be fine. And this one as well. So yeah, let's local maybe, and the file was test study workflow. So this starts running, and then you can basically just see that it starts to log, right? So wherever you schedule this, or it starts, you fire it off with a Docker container or on another machine or whatever. As long as you can reach the location with the GUI, you can see what's going on. So that's the cool part of that. And the other thing that I had was workflow execution info test. That's also a nice one. Workflow tests. Now, if you you can actually see it execute this one, right, and then do a refresh, and then it's here. So you can actually see it perform stuff. If you drill down here, you after a refresh, after a while, you get like all the executions. I don't think it logs this at the end, I think, but yeah, that's the idea. And even while it's doing that, you can jump here and go to the last execution information if it's available, right? It's what you need to know about these files is that the information in the files and folders, since it's not a transactional system, is that it's eventually consistent. Eventually, you're going to have all the information in that folder, but not always immediately. Especially if you're working with remote systems, slow file systems, maybe something like a cloud file system. It might take a bit to get up to date. Whereas if you run with a database, a relational database, or something like Neo4j or some other transactional system, you can basically say, I'm going to only leave behind the consistent view of what's going on. So yeah. So after a while, when all is said and done, then yeah, you can take a look at everything that went on there. So that's pretty cool, right? So even though we didn't do this from the GUI, you can still see what's going on, what's happening. You can see the various result files, just like if you would do it locally or in the GUI, or you don't care about which process fired it off. The information ended up in the location, and yeah, that's pretty much what we wanted to show, right? Let's say have fun with it.
Has anybody played around with this? Any questions, remarks? Whatever?
Well, a lot of work went into creating a new Hop web experience, or a better Hop web experience, in the sense that it's not just for Hop web, right? So if you, for 2.2, this is all 2.2. You might have seen that my fonts are a little bit bigger. So if you say like, okay, maybe I want to make this thing a little bit more clear on the demo, because the low resolution of the video is always a problem. So you can say I'm gonna set the zoom level to 150% and hide the menu bar, because who needs a menu bar, right? And then you can restart Hop. Yeah, this is fine. And what?
You're no longer presenting.
Oh, I'm no longer presenting, right? Hang on, let me find the tab that is my session. So let's do this again. So yeah, so in here, in the look and feel tab of the new configuration perspective, I set a UI zoom level to 150%, and I hit the menu bar. And the menu bar is basically now in here, all the functionality that you might need. That's because we don't really need menu bars all that often, and they are the single thing that doesn't scale on the various operating systems and Hop Web, for example. So it was easier to just say, hey, we're going to just remove that and make everything scale nicely. And that's the same for something like the Docker instance. So I think Hop web development, that's the latest one. If we want to do a pull first, there's always new information, always people updating stuff. Yeah, that thing is getting bigger. That's why I have a gigabit connection, but it's still slow. And so there are a few new, how should I say this? Docker, maybe it's no. So if you just run with Hop hide menu bar, I think we also need like a port 80 to 80.
I think the menu bar is hidden by default, isn't it?
No.
Mm.
There we go. So something like that, right? And it should do something. And then we can go to Yeah, there's a Hop Gui zoom factor that you can set that I just mentioned, but a 1.1 is fine. The 80. And so one of the things that we did was change the menu, the toolbar icons to scalable vector graphics, which was quite a hack actually. We replaced them with image elements in the GUI, but that works quite nicely actually. So what we have by simply removing those scroll bars, I think the scroll bars themselves were like responsible for a lot of refreshes. Every time that we updated the menu, the toolbar icons, we also did like a repositioning of the scroll bars, and it just slowed things down. Even in the regular client, the regular fat client, I guess, this Hop GUI, things feel snappier now that you can just move things around and zoom things and move around with the cursor keys. Those are the stuff that we built, and it was actually built for Hop Web because the scroll bars didn't work in Hop Web, just flat out refused to work. We couldn't get it to work. So now you can just move stuff around here and hit the zoom to fit or one of the buttons. For resizing and creating hop, you get this outline. It's the same as before. Yeah, everything else just works but it feels a lot faster now and a little bit more clean. The graphs, let's say that the visual representation of the pipeline and the workflow is still done on what is conceived as low resolution, but this is driven by the browser, which has a certain pixels per device to pixel ratio or something it's called. It's automatically calculated to make a unified look for web applications possible. And when you then render something on canvas, it comes out like zoomed on my 4K screen, something like 2.38 or something. That's the zoom factor. So the solution there is, since we are capable of rendering these pipelines in scalable vector graphics anyway, is to also replace this visual representation by a scalable vector graphic, which then is natively rendered by the browser. We would then be drawing everything server side, which we're already doing anyway. So that's maybe the next plan, after which it would be looking pretty awesome, I think. What we also did is make everything run out of the box. We now have default. So make this the default checkbox. Something Bart, I think that was his idea. It's a really great idea. It means that people can just run whatever example that gets presented to them, and they can jump straight to the execution information and see, for example, what the sample rows were at these various locations. You see the data pass through this. So yeah. Any questions about this? I think it makes the whole Hop web experience much more enjoyable, much more usable than it was before.
We will have publicly available containers that run Hop web, isn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, we also have that one is even a bit bigger. If you also have a tag called development dash beam, which also already includes the fat chart to launch stuff from Google Dataflow.
Yeah.
And we have the same for the regular Docker containers as well.
I don't know if, yeah, I probably missed GUI zoom factor, yeah.
There's a question if we have any plans of adding authentication, multi-tenancy to Hop Web.
I don't have plans right now, but yeah, that would be nice to have.
What is probably not even that hard to do is just basic authentication can be configured to Tomcat, but then it's just authentication and you're in. But there are no authorizations then.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean, if it's hard, right? Because there's so many different ways to authenticate. What you're building is a real application, and I don't know if we have the bandwidth to do it right now. I guess the way that this happens in communities is that somebody needs it and wants to contribute it. I'm not that much of a Tomcat developer myself. What we are looking into, and this is more 3.x thing, is building a whole set of authentication providers in Apache Hop to store keys, to resolve variables, to access the various virtual file systems. Those kind of things all need authentication at some point, and it needs a better pluggable system. But it would require like a major refactoring of the backend APIs, I guess, right? Sprinkle in all sorts of information into a few thousand calls to the virtual file system backend, which is fortunately already standardized and centralized. So it's not difficult. It's just a lot of work. Right?
Well, yeah, and a can of worms. Once we have
Yeah.
authentication, we'll need to have authorizations because some people will have to be allowed to see certain projects, perform certain actions, and that's a massive amount of work.
Yeah, and then the question also is like, if you do something like that, you also want to have action-based security, like sort of is even more useful, I think, in my opinion, where you would say, okay, this certain user can only see read-only, can only perform certain functions, can only run on certain servers or access certain databases, stuff like that, right? So those are all things that are interesting. But yeah, there's like a ton of stuff that you can do, but it's not on my radar right now. Yeah, collaboration. I still would prefer that you use Git or something like something solid, so that you know who did what and when, and every workstation can work separately. So I think integration with version control is still a best practice, regardless of how you set things up. Yeah. Yeah, great questions. Yeah. I think what we've seen in a previous company I worked for is that if you start building like these repositories or whatever, it's not always that simple, and it's not always that great of an idea. It sounds good. Let's put everything on the same server so that everybody can work together. But often you don't want to work together. The problem, what Linus Torvald identified at some point when he created Git, was that the integration of the various pieces of work that people do, that's the hard part. And so what we did from our end is say, okay, so if you have a pipeline which is different from what you have in the repository, then yeah, we can actually do a visual comparison between two revisions, stuff like that, right? Welcome, Michelle. Uh, any other questions? But yeah, give these things a try. We are very interested in having as many people test as possible, file as many Jira cases as you can. In a lot of cases, if we find bugs, they're like small things, small annoyances, quick to fix. Some of them are like literally 5 minutes to fix, right? Like, oh yeah. Just but we need to know, and the more that you test and the more that you throw these bug reports over the wall, the better it is. Right? Especially on the various platforms, Hop Web, Mac, Windows. There's always something on Windows. So, yeah.
Any feedback on the 2.1 release? It's well, we're working on 2.2, so 2.1 feels a bit like old news, but it's only been a couple of weeks. Questions, remarks, suggestions, whatever.
So yeah, the release. Let's take a look, right? If you look at 2.1, it had 219 issues done, but that was over a period of, I don't know, 3-4 months, four more, June to October, like June, July, yeah, 5 months. But if we look at 2.2, we already have 83 issues done in a month. So this thing is going quite fast, actually. A lot of them are hop web fixes, but yeah, still, there's a lot for everybody in there in the fixes. So give it a shot. 2.1 or 2.2, any bug report, any feedback is welcome. We keep cleaning stuff up. We keep, finding small things that are, that might annoy you, like that default run configuration, the ability to just say, okay, I don't even want to specify it on the hop run command line. I just want to run this thing. I only have one pipeline run configuration. I don't want to specify, here's the default, figure it out yourself. So that's what Hop is doing in 2.2. Stuff like that, right? Makes life easier. All right.
Another question from Manju Prasad. I guess Manju is the short version. Hive wasn't able to figure out if direct creation of managed tables is possible, but I guess since it's just a database dialect now, that shouldn't be much of a problem. Haven't tried it myself.
Hive is really like, I don't know, how old is that? 55 years old. Creating tables, it's fine. Loading data into them is painfully slow. Yeah, it's not meant for the JDBC driver. It's meant for reading data, right? So if you have CSV files in the HDFS folder somewhere, Hive is great for picking those up, picking up Parquet files that are projected as Hive tables. So that's where it shines, I guess. So I would stick to that.
But
once you done have like a gazillion folders filled with Parquet files, you have an issue, right? Because how do you manage all that? What was in those files? And this is where like projects like Apache Iceberg come into play. And this is, we looked at that, maybe integrating with those. And I think there was some people looking around in doing that, but it's a solution to a problem that shouldn't exist, in my opinion, right? But that's all in the perspective of a company says, okay, I have like a couple of 100 petabytes of data. If I have to pay Oracle, that's gonna, break my bank. I'm gonna be bankrupt before the first Oracle set of servers is rolled out. So I want to do it in a cheaper way, and then that's where they make these impossible things possible. That's why these big data technologies were invented in the first place. But yeah, maybe it's more a role for the Apache Beam pipelines. If you really want to generate like really large amounts of data, that's certainly possible with the platforms like Dataflow, Spark, Flink. We did a lot of performance optimization in 2.1, I think. Yeah. And Hop screams on these platforms these days. So it should be straightforward to say I'm going to generate the Parquet files and then create a Hive table on top of that, and then you should be good to go. It shouldn't be too hard to just say then, okay, this folder with Parquet files, let's describe this to Iceberg or the other any other management tool on top of that. I can't imagine that should be too big of an issue. Any other questions? All right.
Short session.
Yeah. The holiday tomorrow here in Belgium. End of the war.
Most of Europe, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, the war stopped more or less on the same day. Well, same period. Same question as always at the end. If you have suggestions for upcoming sessions, let us know. And if not,
we can also dive into any topic you might enjoy. A lot of the stuff that also goes on is backend stuff, which is not always all that fascinating. I know Hans has been working to get that Hop web server running that restarts every hour or something. It's pretty cool, but until it's done, there's not much to say about it, right? It's the same with a lot of the stuff that we're building. Integration tests. I made the mapping, the simple mapping transform work in Apache Beam context, which is pretty cool. So they can do the reusable stuff also in this big data context. But it's not that sexy to say that something was broken and now it's no longer broken. Yeah. Anyway, that's all from me.
last chance for questions, and if not, we'll call it a day.
Not that short, right? It's 50 minutes.
Yeah, no.
So,
I mean, compared to our 2-hour monster sessions we had in the early 3HX days.
Yeah,
This
but
is
yeah,
short.
this is just to give people an impression of what's happening. A lot of stuff is happening. We also get more and more pull requests, more and more people dropping in on the Mattermost Slack server, Jira cases. So that the whole project is moving forward. I think it's not dramatic, right? It's always more and more, I guess, enthusiasm and more stuff going on. And at some point, it's our goal to be as boring as possible, to just work. That's what Linus Torvalds said. What's the biggest thing that you did in 30 years of Linux development? Just fix bugs. Just make it work. That's the biggest thing. Right? Don't present any surprises. Expand our integration test suite. Improve the documentation. If you can help with any of that, just let us know. Any contribution is welcome. Anybody is welcome.
Absolutely.
Hey, thanks, guys.
I did think of a question real quick.
Sure.
So has there been any thought about making it an easy way to exclude plugins in building Docker containers as things get bigger and bigger? The builds are bigger and bigger, and
Yeah.
there's just to make it easier. to then exclude, a whole bunch of classes of things. Like if you don't do Beam, or it'd be nice to exclude those, or have guidance on that.
Yeah, we actually had a lot of talks about this already, and behind the scenes, in front of the scenes, for years actually already. And my conclusion was that, okay, so once the 2.2 is out of the door, the idea was to start working on new features for the environment level. So you have the project and you have the environment level. The environment level is where you should be able to say, I have certain conditions. Certain plugins need to be able to save information in the environment configuration file, and these plugins should be able to play along. So, for example, they would say, if you run something, I want to have a certain version of a plugin available, or I want to have a plugin available or not. I want to have minimum disk space available. I want to have minimum memory available. Those kind of things that check the environment, right? And if in production you don't have those conditions met, then just don't start, give an error, bang. Don't even try to start if you don't have disk space, or if you're working on a read-only folder for whatever, right? And so once you then have this notion of a software profile described in metadata, let's say, then it's natural to also say, I'm going to create a web service somewhere that just either with hop config generates a fat jar or a new deployment based off of just the minimal set of plugins that I need to run. Or even run a scan of a project saying, these are all the plugins that I need, and generate the minimal software set for that. But I think I wanted to take the approach of first gathering a little bit more metadata around that, because otherwise it becomes just a hack, right? Yeah. But if you want to trim down a distribution, you can already do that. Just remove all the plugins from the plugins folder you don't need, and that's all there is to it, basically, right?
But that will make in the end, what we could do is like also provide a minimal Docker file that doesn't contain any plugins, and maybe we can, because we don't do it for releases yet, but we will probably do it for 2.2. Is we're gonna start pushing everything to Maven Central anyway, so we could pretty much write a bash script that you provide a list of plugins, and it'll just download them and place them inside your container. Downside there would be that you either require to build and save your containers in a registry yourself, or at runtime it'll start fetching those plugins every time, and your startup time will drastically increase.
Yeah.
But in the longer run, we do need to look at something like a marketplace. It's been lingering around, just haven't we haven't picked it up yet.
Sure, makes sense. That type of approach makes sense to me. But just we build our own containers anyway, and we publish them to our own repository. But it's just trying to make sure that if we have a way, a simple way to exclude things out of the gate, or start with a slim and only add what we need, it just would save space in our environments.
Yeah, maybe we can just.
I already added like a Beam version now, which is even bigger than the original, because it includes the fat jar. But creating a slim version and adding it to our current builds shouldn't be that much work. It's definitely doable.
Yeah, but adding stuff is easier than clearing everything out and then having to manually add your own plugins.
Yeah, and I don't think it's, well, if you build your own container, I guess you could have like an option to delete maybe some environment variable that you can set. that deletes a bunch of plugins, but I don't know if it will reduce the image all that
Yeah,
much.
that's the downside of Docker. It won't reduce your image size.
So yeah. Maybe somebody can hack that. Yeah, I don't know. But in theory, yeah, you can try it, right? You can you can just try it with a distribution, unzip it, and start throwing away plugins in the plugins folder. See what happens.
Yeah, and add that
It
as
will continue to work. Everything will continue to work. Certain things, if you delete the projects plugin in MISC plugins MISC projects, you won't get the plugins toolbar entries. But everything will continue to work, right?
yeah, and you could do a Hop plugins base folder mounted to a volume, and that will be a dirty hack, but don't see why that wouldn't work.
Mhm.
But it is, wouldn't be very pretty.
But yeah, so yeah, I think at some point you wanted to do this part. I think scan like a project and see which plugins are used, and then determine where they live, and then get a list of all the plugins subfolders that are needed. At that point, you know exactly what you need. But I think we need to build some service somewhere that says, for this software definition, this list of plugins, or even like this, make a zip file with all the HPLs and HWF, scans it, and gives you that that minimal Docker container or that minimal client that you need. Basically, that would be awesome. That would be the bomb. But obviously, this can be something that is published on Apache. Well, except for like what Hans said, the minimal version of that, right?
Mhm.
The zero plugins version.
Yeah, I think the greatest challenge would be determining what's considered minimal. We can pretty much delete all plugins, but then you have
that's
nothing.
minimal. That's really minimal. Yeah.
But that opens up a whole set of questions, because then you could add groups of plugins. I mean, files could include JSON, XML, Excel as well. Databases could include a set of plugins, but that's a can of worms in itself, I guess.
It's just time consuming to manage that, I guess.
Yeah.
But not undoable. Maybe we can automate it somehow, or we need to look into it. Yeah. Cool.
Right.
Well, I'm extremely tired. I'm gonna call it a day. It was good talking to you guys again, and I'll see you on the next 3H18, whenever that is. All right.
Right. Thanks,
Cheers,
everyone.
guys.
Bye.
Have a good one. Bye.